Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I'm your host, the voice of reason. In today's issue, we're going to continue our coverage of the ongoing crisis between Ukraine, Russia, and obviously the West and NATO. And if you continue to monitor news reports and look at the headlines coming out of the mainstream media, really the rhetoric is the same. And I really wanted to look and delve into what has happened within the last week, especially in terms of the demands that have come out of Moscow in regards to what it desires the West do. And by all indications, that demand is really the choice between possible conflict and no conflict. And if you look at those demands, really what Russia is asking is something uh, probably even beyond what the West, the United States, NATO had even considered. He was willing to even confront that issue, and that is the status of NATO in terms of Eastern Europe. So not only has Putin stated very publicly that Ukraine will not be part of NATO, obviously they want a veto that would give the Kremlin the ability to decide whether Ukraine joins NATO or not. But it goes much, much deeper than that in terms of what Moscow is asking. He's asking that the troops that are deployed in Western Ukraine be withdrawn. He's also asking that military assets that have been deployed in places such as Romania, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, all those forces must be withdrawn as well. And then obviously, that is not something that NATO is going to comply with. So then, if that is the demand, if that is the ask, allegedly, quite possibly to prevent military action, what are we looking at here? Has Vladimir Putin gone so far in terms of this buildup we're seeing now? And not only that, but the buildup we observed in April. And I believe, quite honestly, the buildup in April, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, was actually part of the buildup we're seeing now. And for whatever reason, it has taken some time in preparation for whatever operation the Russians are looking at conducting. But again, this has been a significant buildup that has really been going on since spring and has continued all through summer. And just recently has really picked up in tempo in regards to the deployment of forces in October and November, and now we're in December. So again, has Vladimir Putin passed the point of no return? And what's very, very interesting, he's just not including activity that we're seeing in terms of NATO operations or countries that have good relationships with Ukraine in terms of that area of operations. He is making demands now that again NATO is simply not going to comply with. So what does that mean? Could there be something additional on the table here? So we know that Russia, over the past uh, several years now, has been conducting many snap exercises. I would say the tempo of operations in terms of training and preparedness is much greater than what we see in terms of Western preparedness. So again, we're seeing in some cases multi-divisional operations, multi-brigade operations, whereas in the West, it's really difficult to identify when the last time the U.S. has even conducted multi-brigade operations, much less multi-divisional operations. So again, what is going to happen? Could in all possibility, there be contingency plans in Moscow to quite possibly seize the Baltics and go further than what we're looking at now in terms of possible operations in the Ukraine. And I'm trying to sit here and look in terms of strategically what Vladimir Putin is thinking. And obviously, that's very difficult to do. And if you look at the idea that, let's say he launches let's say a limited invasion of the Ukraine, or let's say it's a fairly expansive invasion that doesn't go beyond the Dnieper River. And again, let's just say he's looking at seizing the area east of the Dnieper River, and obviously that is here. And again, a significant amount of territory, and it looks like the capability to complete that operation is present. And now the problem is, let's hypothetically say he achieves that goal. He takes the eastern Ukraine. Well, you still have the western Ukraine. And obviously, once we see massive military operations and we see eastern Ukraine seized, well, all bets are off the table in terms of considerations by the West on not arming what is left of the Ukraine to the teeth. So Vladimir Putin is now looking at this and saying, well, I take the eastern Ukraine, then obviously I'm now looking at in 5 years from now, quite possibly a much more better armed Ukraine in terms of Western equipment that could be shipped to Ukraine. So then that would go into the equation in terms of in the planning, in terms of Putin looking at, okay, well, I've taken eastern Ukraine, and now I have this entity in terms of what exists on the western side of Ukraine that is now being heavily armed with God knows what sort of assets. So why not just take the whole thing? Why not just have the ability to, if something occurs, to quite possibly threaten Poland? Why not just move into Belarus? And then obviously he's looking also at Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Now I'm going down the worst case scenario road right now, which really leads to almost quite possibly a world war, unless the West backs down. If the West has already stated that they will not intervene militarily on the side of Ukraine. The United Kingdom has stipulated that they will not be sending troops to support Ukraine, and the United States has said so much as well. Now, obviously, Poland and Germany are definitely not going to go it alone. I mean, the Germans aren't going to do anything. Really, the only hope for direct support for the Ukraine would be Poland in this current conflict. And maybe that's what Putin is looking at. And if he does take, again, eastern Ukraine, obviously he's now looking at a massive armament of what is left of Ukraine by the West. And then he's also probably looking at the reinforcement of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, contrary to what the original ask was. So then, again, possibly Putin is of the mind, well, I'm just going to take the whole enchilada. I'm going to seize it all and take it all. And again, is that possible? Could he do that? Does he have the military capability to do that at this point? Well, again, I think we're all at this point kind of unsure. I mean, obviously he would have the ability to seize control of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Now the question is what would this look like in terms of an invasion of the entire Ukraine? The goal, the military goal of seizing all of the Ukraine. Now, I'm not so sure Russia is there yet. I do believe they could seize the eastern half of the Ukraine, but taking it all without a massive expansion of the existing Russian armed forces, And maybe that's what we're looking at. Maybe at some point, if this kicks off, it is a rolling start where the Russians then, because war has started, announces a massive mobilization. And obviously, we have the ground forces, the National Guard, which is 180 to 200,000 personnel, could obviously be utilized to directly support the ground forces, and in all probability, would become much more active in terms of military operations. But again, I just wanted to kind of create an atmosphere of discussion around just what we're looking at, and what is Putin going to do, and what the cost versus the benefit. Obviously, he could do nothing at all. But again, he's really put himself in a position with these demands, not only just the demands, but the force posture that we're looking at now, in the capital that has been expended in terms of moving all these forces to the border of Ukraine, and then there's the things we don't know about that are going on in the background as well. So again, has Putin put himself into a corner where he has to act, and if he does act in a limited capacity, is his thought process now, well, if I do that, that's going to put me in a, quite possibly 5 years from now, a much more challenging situation in terms of having even more NATO assets in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in Western Ukraine. So why not just take the whole thing now? Why not just get this over with? And at this point, I don't believe NATO is going to come to the aid of the Baltic states, which myself, I do not believe NATO will come to the aid of the Baltic states, because at this point, the way NATO has atrophied just in terms of ground forces, being able to assemble a force to to invade what was basically the former Soviet Union, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, which again is very close to the center of gravity in terms of Russian capabilities, would be incredibly challenging. And the whole idea that NATO could retake Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from a Russian occupying force, and if Russia fully mobilizes, again, we simply do not know. It would be a war, and the best man would end up winning, or the best army would end up winning. But that's kind of where we're at now. And again, this is a very, very situation. Again, especially in terms of the rhetoric in the corner that kind of Moscow is putting themselves in. I mean, they almost don't have the ability for a safe face-saving back out. Again, they've made some incredible demands, and those demands are simply not going to be met. And if they are, that opens up another entire can of worms. But more to come and more to talk about. Feel free to comment in the comment section, and we'll talk soon. Have a good day, everybody.